Welcome to The Inner Practice, a podcast about healing, resilience, and the quiet ways we come back to ourselves. I'm your host, Jackie Vandertoon. Sometimes the most powerful transformations don't begin with a plan. They begin with a feeling, a moment when something shifts, where the body speaks in a way the mind hasn't yet learned to understand. Today's guest, Cassie Doucette, knows that moment well. As co-owner of the Loft Yoga Studio in Nova Scotia's Annapolis Valley, Cassie shares how her first yoga class changed everything, connecting breath to movement in a way that opened the door to something deeper. Trained as an addictions counselor, she began to see a gap between theory and lived experience, one that yoga helped bridge through embodiment, emotion, and connection. In this episode, we explore how Cassie has created a space where people can show up authentically, where emotions are not only welcomed, but named, felt, and honored. From small-town stigma to generational healing, from anxiety to community transformation, this conversation is about what becomes possible when people are finally given permission to feel. Let's step inside the practice. Cassie, I am really excited to have you here, and I am from the bottom of my heart welcoming you from beautiful Annapolis Valley, Nova Scotia.
Hi, Jackie. I'm so thrilled to be here with you and so happy to have the opportunity to be on your podcast. Thank you.
Yeah. So Cassie, as I told you, I was kind of stalking your studio a little bit. I finally went to a class, and I am truly glad because I had no idea what to expect. But the sense that I got there was this warmth, this welcoming, this beautiful space, and an authentic practice that was just grounded in grace and beauty. And I absolutely loved it. But we will get there. But one of the reasons why I'm super curious about your yoga is I grew up in the Annapolis Valley, and I want to know, because we're both from small towns. And growing up in a small town is larger than being in a larger town. And you and I were talking, and there's some unspoken kind of rules around emotions and vulnerability. And you and I grew up in different generations, but can you tell me a little bit, what kind of are those unspoken rules around that emotional sense and that vulnerability that people have?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, growing up in a small town isn't easy. It's not often you're allowed to feel vulnerable. And, when you are, it can come out as looking weak sometimes. It can come out as looking odd, weird. I feel like being in a small town, you're just conformed to what this small town wants you to be. And it's getting a lot better, but there's still that sense of you have to be the way society wants you to be. And it's very much in a past of decades ago, and it's slowly getting out. But vulnerability, can often look like weakness here. And in return, like strength might mean something different. I feel like being strong is almost like, you can show your true colors, you can be yourself. That's strength. That's what I'm teaching my children. Whereas strength in the Valley can look like, you work hard, you put your time in, you don't set those boundaries, you just push and you go and you go. And that's what strength looks like in the Valley, when there could be a deeper meaning for strength, something more personal, and something, it feels good to be strong in a different way.
Yeah. By the way, we call the Annapolis Valley the Valley, so that's common colloquialism in case you're wondering, what are they talking about, the Valley? I appreciate that because I'm actually really curious in how you define strength.
I think when I look at people who I admire and I think about their strength, I think about them being honest with themselves. I think about them being who they are, speaking their truth, respecting themselves in a deeper way. And I mean, like, I'm strong too in a physical way because I like doing lots of yard work. I do yoga, I do kickboxing, I do all those things. But I think strength can really mean being strong and believing in the person that you are.
Yeah. Yeah, and I I don't want to put words in your mouth, but certainly when it looks at using emotions as well. And when I grew up, I grew up with the mantra big boys don't cry,
Mm.
or the whole let me give you something to cry about. Like you just didn't show your emotions, particularly from a female perspective. Like you did not show your emotions. Um, has that changed at all, do you think, growing up and being in the valley now?
I think it's gotten a little bit better, but I hear you. I remember being in high school and it was just like if you even as a girl in high school, if you showed your emotions, it was like if you started crying, it was really embarrassing. You were the odd one out and you just didn't do that. It's something you didn't do. But I feel like I've kind of fitted myself into a space that I feel comfortable doing that now. But outside of that space, I don't. So the valley is still very much in a space that it's not okay to show your emotions all of the time. It's feeling strong in a way that you don't show your emotions. And that's what strength is around here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't want to pick on the Annapolis Valley, but I think that's endemic in any small town environment where, hard work, that stoic kind of mentality of hard work is what pays off and weak individuals show their emotions. So I don't want to pick on the Annapolis Valley. It's just that
Mm.
that is my familiarity and that's, where you grew up as well. Um, Cassie, growing up in that small town environment, how did that affect you and shape your own feelings and ability to express your emotions?
I think growing up, not being able to express myself, it really suppressed a lot. I wasn't comfortable to share my feelings around not only my friends, but even my family. And I think that was like the generation that my mom grew up in was that you didn't really talk about your feelings. You just were strong, like air quotes. And, you had your feelings when you were alone in your room when no one else was around. And it was hard. It was really, really hard because looking back, like it was just a little girl or a kid or a teenager or even as a young woman, like you didn't do that. You suppressed it all.
Yeah. Can I delve a little deeper into that and what did that show up in you with that suppression?
I think a lot of hurt. I think a lot of resentment showed up because I couldn't express my feelings. I didn't want to tell people how I felt because I was scared of being judged. And I was judged when I did tell people how I felt. And it was hard. There was a lot of resentment. There was a lot of not being able to feel comfortable to set boundaries in my space. Like I didn't know how to not only set a boundary, but maintain a boundary. I didn't even know what boundaries were until I was in my early 20s. Like it was something that you just didn't do. You did what you were told. And, you had to be a good kid. You had to do your work. You put your head down and you would get through life that way.
Right, right. And my interest is in medicine. And I'm snickering a little bit. I just had this conversation with my husband about how you're constantly in that not able to show emotions and how that manifests itself in your body as well from a feeling sensation, but from a chronic disease perspective as well. So I really love the fact that you've created a space in your yoga studio, which we'll get to, which is very freeing, very an opportunity to show emotions. But um, how did yoga well, maybe you can tell me a little bit about kind of that first experience when you went into your first yoga class. Because as you said, you kickbox, you garden, you do like physical things, and you come to a yoga studio.
Yeah. Uh, I think it was like 15-ish years ago, and my friend was going to a new yoga studio in town, and I think we only had 2 yoga studios in the valley at that time, and it wasn't a big thing. I mean, in the cities, yes, but not around here. And I remember going and just showing up in like my shorts and my t-shirt, and I walked through the doors, and everyone was in their, fancy Lululemon stuff, and they were all doing handstands, and it was so intimidating, and the class was packed. I mean, you were mat to mat. I had no idea what I was doing. It was a powerful class. So I just kind of made space for myself on my mat. I followed along and did my best in that class, and something just clicked in me. It was just the body and the breath connection. It was being mindful on my mat. I don't think there was ever a time where I wasn't doing one thing and thinking about something else. It was just finding that presence where I didn't have time to think about anything else. I had to be there on my mat with my breath and my body, and I didn't have space to think of anything else. And I loved that.
Why did you love that? Like, if you're used to that go, 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 and now you're stopping, like, how did that show up for you? I mean, I'm thinking your brain's kind of, I need to fixate on something. I need to do something. And it wasn't, moving at 1,000,000 miles a minute.
Yeah, I think it was honestly just being like fixated on the moment. I had never had space or time to do that. It was almost like a break from my thinking. It was a break from my being. It was just a pause in moment, but it wasn't. It was just a beautiful space for me to show up for myself, really.
Mm-hmm. And so what happened after that first class?
I kept going back. I would go back like 4 or 5 times a week. I used to work night shifts then, so I would go work for 12 hours during the night, and then I would go to a yoga class in the morning after my night shift. And it was just like it was a huge turning point in my life where it gave me the opportunity to get to know myself a little bit better.
Can you share me more with that?
Yeah, I think because I didn't really take the time to slow down and listen to my body and connect with my breath. At that time in my life, I was in my early 20s, and I was working, I think, 3 different jobs. I had just bought a house by myself, and I was running all over the province, working here and doing this and that, and running to yoga classes. But being there gave me the break that I needed to turn inward, because even when I was at home, you're busy at home, you're doing all of these things, and your brain stops and rests when you sleep. But it's important to stop and rest when you're not just repairing yourself at nighttime too. It's important to stop and rest and be aware of what's happening in your body. And yoga really taught me to tune inward and find your inner peace, find your self-care that you need. And yoga was that for me in that point in my life, and still very much is.
Yeah. So before that, where, you talk about this inner peace, did you have that inner peace before finding yoga?
I'm sure it was in there somewhere. I just was young, and I guess I wasn't looking for it. I think yoga just sort of pulled it out. I think it was just so rushed to grow up and to do this and to do it that way, everybody else's way. And I never found something that I truly enjoyed. It was like when you finish school, you have to, go to post-secondary, and when you have to do your homework, and you have to do this, and you have to find a group of friends, and you have to do sports, and you need to do all of these things. And it's just like society pushing you into a way that you never really actually get the time to sit with yourself and find peace within yourself. I've always been a really creative person. And I think like when I was younger, I did a lot of like sort of artsy things where I would just paint or, make things with my hands. And that was incredibly mindful for me. But as I grew older, I didn't make space or make time for that anymore.
you mentioned that you have to, like you grew up in an environment where you have to do these things. I have to prepare to go to school. I have to get a job. I have to do all these things. Is that something that, you struggled with this mindfulness, this presence versus the I have to do things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a society, we're shaped around this is what you do and this is how you grow, and you have to be a moving part of society. And when I went to school, there wasn't yoga in school. There wasn't anything that was like, hey, it's really important to do self-care. It was like gym where you did a beep test and you had to, like, again, just run as fast as you could, or
Yeah.
you were tested on all of these things. And it shapes you into being a person that just goes, goes, goes. And I think that's where, like, what strength is supposed to look like in society. You're strong, you go, you don't stop. But like I noticed today, like school is different and they teach you more mindfulness and they teach you yoga and things that you can carry with you into adulthood and into the next phase of your life, where back then they didn't. And it was not as important to do all these things, because I'm not even sure I knew what mindfulness was until I was probably, in my early 20s again. Like, it just wasn't something that was brought up, something that was supposed to be important.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly with me growing up, and I still find myself doing this. I live 5 minutes in the future and I live 5 minutes in the past.
Yeah.
And I vacillate between that. What am I going to do? I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, what am I going to do today? Instead of being like, I hear the birds outside. Now I wake up and I'm like, because I sleep with my window open, I hear the birds outside and I see the colors of the sky, and it's beautiful instead of waking up and saying, what am I going to do today? Like I'm already in future
Yeah.
mode, or ruminating on what I said, what I did, what I've done in the past instead of listening to the birds or
Yeah.
seeing the sky. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Cassie, you have created this beautiful yoga space, and I have to tell you, it's kind of a contrast. And maybe you can describe the space, because when you come in from the outside, it looks different, but when you come in from the inside, it's that it's that grounding, it's that presence, it's that okay, I can be here. But can you talk to me a little bit about your yoga space that you've created?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are in the upstairs of a very, very old community hall. Um, Actually, it used to be like a girls' choir. It used to be a schoolhouse way back in the day. Small town, small town stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you come in from the outside, it's very much a community center looking old building. You go in, and we're kind of some stairs to your left. And as you go up the stairs, they're very creaky, very old, very steep. So you go up and you open this old creaky wooden door, and then it's this beautiful open space with stamped tin walls and a vaulted ceiling. And the acoustics in there are absolutely amazing. The floors are original to the building, and it's just so soft when you open the door. That's the only way I can kind of describe it, is you walk in and it's just softness. The energy in there is safe and peaceful and very welcoming. There's a little stage as you walk in where sometimes I teach up there and sometimes we teach in circle, depending on how many people are there. And we've created a space where there's candles and props where you're welcome to go grab your own on the stage. And there's actually an old piano in there from the Girl Guides that had donated it a long time ago, but the thing is so heavy, we can't take it out of there or put it in the back room, so it stays there. It's a staple in our studio. But it's beautiful there, and it's very welcoming, and it holds a lot, not just a lot of physical things, a lot of people. It holds a lot of space for people to come and be themselves there.
Yeah, when I went in there, it was very warm. And I mean that from the physical sense, but I also mean it from, the emotional sense, because there was an energy in there that created that warmth. And you didn't know me, and you greeted me, right? Like it was just an opportunity for me just to feel welcome because I truly was a stranger coming into this building. But as soon as I entered, I got this, and
Mhm.
as someone coming in, usually there's a what do I do? Where do I go? Where, what's the protocol? How do I pay? Like all of these things go through your mind, but there was none of that. It was just welcome, welcome, find a space for you. And I appreciate that so much. You've created such a great space. But I want to kind of contrast a little bit because how long ago did you open this studio?
We were there probably 10 years ago to start, except it needed a lot of renovations back then. So it was cold in the winter. It was too hot in the summer. So we ended up moving to another space until we kind of could work with the hall and get some grants in there and spice it up with some new windows, a new roof, and a new heat pump. So we've been there now for probably, I would say, 6 or 7 years consistently. Hmm.
And what do you notice about the people? Because again, part of the thing that really interests me is a small town. And we talk on this podcast about embracing being weird. And we embrace weird because we just don't follow the norm. But how did you open the doors to people who may be like, what is this thing yoga? And they come into this environment because when I was there was quite a few people there and there were some new people there as well. So what
Hmm.
did you do to say, here I am, come in and see me, and then have people continue to come?
Continue to come back. I think I think when people show up, personalizing that showing up. So greeting you at the door is, making sure that you feel safe there and you feel greeted and you know what you're doing and where you're going. I have a lot of anxiety around showing up to new places. Where do I get in at? Where's the door? Where's the bathroom? Where do I sit? Where do I go? Do I need anything? So I'm in that space where I know what it feels like to show up to a new space. And it's such a relief when I walk into a new place and someone tells me what to do or where to go or greets me in a soft, kind way. So that's how I like to greet people as they come in. But I also think the space itself holds like softness and kindness too. So I think people come back because they know they can show up as they are. They can show up, when they need to. Some people don't come back every week. Sometimes, you go through a rough patch and you show up in a season that you're in and you stay for a while and then you don't come back and then you do come back. But I think just being able to hold a space for anybody, it's important to me that, like, I remember when I walked into that first yoga studio, it was mostly just women who were really fit and really strong and wore really nice clothes. And I love that vibe and it's great and it's very appealing. But also, it's much deeper than that, too. It's holding a space where you can show up and be yourself. You can show up and not feel judged and be able to laugh, be able to cry, be able to make friends there. And I know a lot of people that have. And I wouldn't want it to be any other kind of space.
Yeah, and I love it because I don't want to judge people, but what I really want to say is there and I don't know if anybody wore Lulu, like I wasn't paying attention to clothing wise, but there were different bodies there. There were males there, there were females there. But one of the things that really spoke or resonated to me that it's really important because I do compare myself to others frequently. It's something that I'm struggling with. But you had said this is your class. There is no comparison to others. And
Mhm.
when you said that, it just allowed me to be like, okay, just close your eyes and flow. Just close your eyes and flow because,
Mhm.
I'm not looking at the person next to me, and it doesn't matter. But I love the fact that you gave that permission. And I hadn't heard that before in another class. But why did you, or is that something you frequently say, or is that just a one-off and I happened to be there in the universe open and someone said to you, well, talk to Jackie. Or is that something that you really embody and want to make sure everyone feels?
I can honestly say I probably say that almost every class, because when I'm in a class, that's something that I also need to hear. It's easy to look at the person in front of you or beside you and compare yourself to them. And I think giving people that reminder is just allows them to be on their mat and not have that comparison.
Yeah. And I think, again, to contrast that small town environment, because it's such a small town environment, you can't help but compare yourselves to others, right? Like you grow up playing a sport and you either you play rep or you play house or you start or you sit on the bench. Like in school, you either are the smart kid or the not smart kid. Like there's all these comparisons,
Mm-hmm.
and you gave that permission to buck the trend and just be who you are. I think that's why your class really spoke to me when I was in the valley. And I so appreciate that. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
One of the things that you and I talked about was this generational patterns of silence or trauma showing up. How do you notice that in the people who enter your space? And I say that because if you're from a small town, one of the things we often say in the Maritimes is, "Who's your father?" Because as soon
Right.
as you know that, you automatically pigeonhole somebody. You know everything about them by knowing who their father is, which means you know their grandfather, etc. Which means a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that trauma is passed down, and a lot of that stigma is passed down as well. Have you seen that in your classes, or have you just seen that with living in the valley yourself?
Absolutely. I've seen it. I've seen it in my classes, and I have seen it out in the community as well. And I think it's a really hard cycle to break. Um, I mean, I'm living it too, and I'm working really hard to break this generational cycle of holding my feelings in and doing the work. Doing the work is really, really hard. But when you talk about it with others and you open it up, or you plant seeds with others, you start to grow and your kids start to grow into a way that's different than what it used to be like in the valley.
Yeah. How do you mitigate that? Because you're an addictions counselor as well, you're trained as an addictions counselor. How do you mitigate that generational trauma from being passed down? I know you've talked about your ensuring that you don't want to pass that on to your kids, but
Mhm.
are you able to do that in your yoga classes or is that just how you interact with people?
No, I think just showing up consistently for yourself. I think talking about feelings, which obviously we don't do enough, in a safe space, a non-judgmental space, opens up a little part, hopefully, of people that come to my class, and they can take that home with them and share with their family, with their kids. Um, yeah, more connection. I feel like it's just more
Yeah,
connection in the community, and the more that you talk about things, the more you generalize them and grow.
yeah, yeah. Kathy, I remember one of the first times that, well, I cry on the mat all the time. And I remember the first time I did it, I'm like, this is really weird. I'm not 100% sure what's going on. But then I came to find out it's kind of a common thing. And then when people say to me, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I don't know what got over me. I just started to cry. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, it happens to everybody. And they're like, really? I'm like, it happens to everybody.
Happens, yeah.
Why do you, I mean, have you ever experienced that? I kind of know the answer to that, but have you ever experienced that? And how do you deal with that if you have, with, sharing that with people and saying it's okay, it's not okay? Like, how do you manage that when people are like, oh my gosh, I'm not strong, I'm weak because I cried on the mat?
Hmm. I've definitely experienced it multiple times. I think it's great now. I remember it happening to me the first time, and it was a Shavasana song. And it was like, I don't know, it got me right in the feels, and I was crying. Like it was good. But at the time, it was really embarrassing, and I didn't want anyone to see me. So it was, wipe those tears away. But it's so important to embrace that. If something comes up on your mat enough for you to cry, even maybe not know why or not understand what's happening. I know when we do a lot of hip openers, it can release a lot of tension, a lot of stress, a lot of things that you've been holding on to that might need to be released. And when we release things, even in our bodies, not emotionally, we can cry. Crying is a physical release as well. Just like you're opening up your hips, you're opening up your tear ducts, you're letting it out, and you're releasing things that have been stored in your body for long periods of time. And I encourage it. Sometimes when we're doing hip openers, they'll be like, you know what? This can be a really vulnerable pose. If you feel like crying, you cry. If you feel like laughing, hey, that's okay. You can laugh too. It's whatever's happening in your body, sit with it and feel it, because we just don't do that. It's something that is, again, in the valley, and I'm sure other parts too, it's suppressed. You suppress your feelings, but we've suppressed it for so long. Like, it's time to just sit with them. Just feel what's happening in your body.
Yeah, and I hung around, I took pictures after because I wanted to talk to you, but there were, a group of women, and they were hugging and they were talking, and it was just a beautiful opportunity to see that shared connection with people that, again, growing up in the valley, that's not something that people do. And I joke when I moved to Ontario, I'm like, people hug each other? Like, what is going on with people wanting to hug me? I'm like, oh, don't hug me. Only, people only hug each other when they're like sad or something like that. But it was so nice to see that connection with people after the class.
Yeah, I feel like there has been some work done when people can move together and breathe together as a community. I mean, individually too, yes, find your connection with your breath and move your body with that connection and breath, but also collectively as an entire class to breathe together and to make it work together. I've seen so many friendships born at that studio. And it's a beautiful thing, because people are finding their people. Your vibe attracts your tribe. And that's so important, because I didn't find my tribe for a really, really, really long time. And now that I have, it's opened up a whole new world for me. And I'm just seeing it open up all these little worlds for other people too. And it's so exciting to see.
Yeah, that is awesome. I never thought about that. So you are, growing up and you connecting with people when you were in high school to finding a group of people that's I'm going to air quote that are, I mean, you called it your tribe, I call it weird people. Is that kind of like the same type of thing?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. I think I think you go through different seasons of life. And, when you're in high school, you're kind of forced to be around people that is in your grade, you go to class with every day, and you spend 8 hours with them. But you also don't know who you are in high school. Like, maybe you do, but I certainly did not know who I was. And I was very much a follower in high school, into college. And then finally, when you kind of separate yourself and you find someone that you connect with, and then that person connects you with another person, and then you're just creating all these connections, and it's so much bigger than high school that you spend all these, these 8 hours with people that you're just forced to spend time with. You're not forced to spend time with these people that you make connections with and that you truly build relationships with. It's by choice, and it's so much different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How do those previous relationships or current relationships, and if you look back over the 15 years since you found yoga, how have they changed? Have other people grown toward you or grown away from you?
I think both. I mean, I still have a couple of really good friends from high school, and we've grown a lot together, but I've also had friends that I've had to let go. And that was a really hard thing to do, but working on myself and healing myself gave me permission and gave me strength to be able to diminish those relationships so that I could build new ones and have the time and energy to focus on ones that were important to me, that helped me grow, and that supported me in ways that I didn't even know you could be supported, like emotionally. And and spiritually. It's a beautiful thing when you let go of something so that you can create space for other things.
Yeah, and I've talked on this podcast before how my husband has mentioned there's like I don't get upset about things as much as I used to, because now I can just tell myself, it's not a hill I'm going to die on. Like in the big scheme of things, it doesn't matter. Like chill. It doesn't matter. Which for myself has just been this beautiful gift I've given to myself, which helps me not spend time in the past or in the future, that I'm able to enjoy those birds or the sunrise or, hear the stick crack when I walk over top of it. So for me, those lessons that I've learned on the mat have been so helpful outside, off the mat. Can you comment about like, is that similar to you or is that completely different?
Absolutely. I mean, actually, just listening to that felt like a breath of fresh air, just to be able to let things go. And I think the older that I get and the more experiences that I have, it feels so good to let go and learn more about what I even like or what I need. But practicing on your mat, like working through discomfort, like physically, if you can be in a pose and it feels really bad and you want to get out of it so bad and it hurts and you're tired, but you sit through it that much longer, you use your breath, use your strength and your emotional strength and your physical strength, and you get through it. That means just as much on your mat as it means off of your mat, because I use that with my kids every day. They really push my buttons sometimes. Yeah. So using what I learned on my mat, like taking some deep breaths and being able to sit through it and being able to set a boundary and say, okay, this is okay. Or, being on your mat and being like, I can't do this anymore. I need to take a break. And knowing my limits and then listening to my body. Everything that I learn on my mat, I can take with me off of my mat. And I think people are just starting to realize that the more work you do, the harder that you heal, the more work you can do off of your mat and outside of the studio.
Yeah, I love that you say that because I often comment, and I don't judge, but when I started, I always grab hold of my watch when I talk about the first time that I started doing yoga because I would click it on and count my calories because that's who I was. Mm-hmm. And then gradually I don't even turn my watch on. It just happens to be on my wrist. I don't even look at it. But I often tell my classes, I'm like, when we're in a difficult pose like chair pose, you have two options. You can either sit with it and know that this is temporary, or you can listen to your body and just take whatever pose works for you. There is, as you mentioned, no comparison with anybody else. So if you're in a chair pose and you're like, I don't want to do it, then go to a mountain pose or just go to Shavasana or child's pose. Or again, go back to this is only temporary and take that into life as well. This, task that I have that I'm finding difficult is only temporary instead of ruminating on it again and again. So yeah, I mean, I got goosebumps when you were saying that because I love the fact that yoga is so much more than the physicality of that. And that's what I got out of your studio as well, is you tapped into the huge umbrella of what is underneath yoga. But Cassie, I want to talk about something which is near and dear to my heart. And one of the beautiful things with the Loft, because I come from a military background and the military is very big in the Valley, is you offer free classes to military veterans. Why do you do that? And how was that received in the community?
So one of my good friends is military. She was discharged from the military a few years back. And she actually is the one that offers the free classes. She also runs our beginner class. Her name is Stephanie, and she is lovely. And I think she knows it's so important for people with military background to hold space for themselves in a safe space. And she decided that she wanted to offer free classes to military. And you wouldn't believe the response that she had gotten from that. And I think it's so beautiful because we need that in our community. I mean, not only is it financially freeing for some people, but it's also like less judgmental, because it's like you can just show up. You just show up and you be on your mat and find a safe space. And I've gone to a few of her classes and they are beautiful. Like I said, she's a beginner and she makes it fun and makes it, not so serious. And it's a really good time in her class. And I think she has that background. She was gone through some traumas and she can offer that space in an empathetic way.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I love this is because of that intergenerational trauma that's passed down from one person to the next generation. And so this is why I'm so impressed by this, that your studio offers this, is because if you could stop or teach those individuals who have seen absolutely horrendous things when being in the military, if you could stop that, man, the effect you would have on future generations, I can only imagine. It just occurred to me, can you maybe comment on that with your background in addictions counseling as well?
Yes, absolutely. Can you be a little more clear on the question around?
Well, yeah, I'm just thinking that addictions counseling, if I'm addicted to a substance, this is your area, not mine, it's usually because I'm coping with something. And it might come from that previous trauma that I've gone through. So if we're able to manage the trauma of a person, then the next generations might be healed. Like what are your thoughts with regards to what I'm talking about?
So being in an addictions unit, we did a withdrawal management program and offered like a 21-day program where you went after you withdrew. And it was incredible regarding the diversity of people who showed up there. I'm talking older people, younger people, people who were, in a higher class, people who were in a lower class, people from all walks of life would show up there. And some would stay and some wouldn't. Some people would come back and some people would come back clean and sober and really change not only their habits, but their whole life. And, a lot of people who came there came as parents as well. And I think I learned a lot there as, a 20-something-year-old addictions counselor. That's where I learned about boundaries. That's where I learned about mindfulness and teaching these things to others. And I think when you do the work, when you do the healing on yourself and you sit down and you feel your feelings, it breaks those cycles. The amount of older men that came in telling me that they could never cry and then sat there and had a really good cry was beautiful. I could cry right now just thinking about it. It was, I know just even, crying is, an emotion that I have almost daily now. But watching an older man cry for the first time in maybe his whole life was amazing. And right there broke a generational tradition or habit or cycle that, he could share with his family. And maybe he didn't share it, but that's something that younger men might have seen in our group therapy sessions. And even just to sit and talk about how you're feeling. We talked a lot about feelings there, and people didn't know how they felt. It's like, okay, I feel sad. Okay, let's sit with that sadness, but also can we dig a little deeper? And, why are you sad? Okay, you're angry. Okay, anger is really just the tip of the iceberg here. Let's dig a little deeper. What happened? Can we talk about our feelings in a way that is productive and a way that we can learn from this and move forward with this? And, some people were, like I said, younger and grew up in a way that, was a little bit more modern than some of our older clients. And, it just breaks my heart to think of, some of these people who were crying there for the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just reflecting back onto a yoga mat because this is a yoga podcast about, wow, what an opportunity for someone to cry for the first time and know they're in a safe space. Cassie, I'm going to ask you just to extrapolate a little bit. We have a clinic, I'll call it lack of a better word, um, close to here, and many of my guests have spoken about it. And yoga is a rehab. It's an addictions center, but
Mhm.
there's an opportunity to do yoga for these people. What are your thoughts with regards to people who struggle with addictions and doing yoga?
I think it's a great chance to find a foundation for just working on your breath or connecting with your body. I actually had begun my yoga teaching practice when I was still actively working at the hospital for addictions. And so I did offer a lot of chair yoga in the mornings. And it was so great to be able to offer that. But there were so many clients that were, oh, no, 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 like I can't go into a pretzel, and have all these preconceived ideas of what yoga actually is. And it was very much just sitting. Maybe we stretched a little, but we worked on our breath and we checked in. We had a little gratitude, but it was, oh, no, 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 I don't do yoga. And there's a lot of people that just didn't show up for it, which is fine. And some people would show up and they would sit in their chairs for the entire time with their eyes closed or stare at the wall behind me, which was also fine. They were still showing up. Maybe it was planting a little seed there, but also, I think it opened some hearts a little bit too, to even, when you move your muscles and you move your body and you release into your fascia, it releases things. And I think for some people, we might have just hit that a little bit enough for them to have that tool in their recovery box. And I think that was really important for them to connect with and to sit with their breath, because again, in the valley, you go, go, go. In society, that's what you're taught to do. You're not taught to sit down and feel. You're taught to suppress it all, and you're taught to just keep going and keep being a productive part of society, whether you're feeling bad or good.
Yeah, I was teaching my class the other day, and I was talking about, we were doing the 8 limbs of yoga, and so we're starting with asanas, and really the purpose of the movement, the postures, is just so you could sit and be in silence. That's why you move, to give you the strength to do it. That's why you have the flexibility, so you could sit. So this westernized perspective of, and I was there, like starting my watch and counting my calories, it's grown for me that that is one aspect of it. It is the mental, the emotional aspects that are so much deeper than that. But, and I get that that's hard for people who grew up in a westernized small town. Is yoga's about, it's just another form of physical activity. How do you introduce, like, you have someone coming in, never did yoga before, how do you introduce, and I'll air quote, the weirdness of your class to someone who's expecting to, burn 400 calories in an hour?
Mhm. I think there's still quite a few people that show up that way and, click their watch at the beginning of class, click their watch at the end of class. But I think reminding my students that inevitably it's their class. It's not my class. It's their class. It's their time for movement, for self-care. It's their time on their mat. And I think whether they realize it or not, whether they, grasp the concept of sitting and feeling, or just being present on your mat, I think it's really important for them to just experience it. Like maybe they haven't experienced that before in a yoga class, um, until they came to my class. And again, I keep going back to like planting a seed, but I think if you're not exposed to it, you don't know it. Like when I was younger, I wasn't exposed to really talking about my feelings or being who I wanted to be, my weird little creative self that I wanted to express myself through, like fun art and things like that, got shut down pretty quick when I went to school, and it wasn't cool. So being able to just plant that seed, and maybe it grows a little bit more each time they show up for themselves on or off the mat.
Yeah, and I always think about if we could tap into a younger generation, and you're not that old, but I'm thinking of like little kids, if we could teach them the opportunity to feel their feels and know what to do with those feelings, and recognize that today's just not a good day, or today is a really good day. And I'm just going to honor how I feel today. And I don't want to push through so they don't become adults with lots of struggles and pass it on to others. Cassie, have you ever witnessed moments where someone breaks through that small town conditioning? And if so, what does that look like?
I think sometimes it doesn't look like anything. I think sometimes people can show up and have a breakthrough, and sometimes these breakthroughs aren't incredibly, loud or overexciting. And I think that they often happen over time. Sometimes it looks like crying on your mat. Sometimes it looks like releasing tension, like softening through their shoulders, or you can tell that they're really focusing on their breath. But I think oftentimes it's the fact that they just keep coming back, and again, doing the work off of the mat as well is just as important. And I always, not always, but I do suggest, go home and journal about this, because at the end of every class that I teach, I always offer up a gratitude prompt. And, if maybe some people go home and they journal about it and they have a good cry, I know I often do. But, sometimes that's where the work is behind closed doors. It's not a lot of times where people will stop and say, hey, I had a great class. Like, I had a breakthrough. This is what happened. Sometimes it does happen. Sometimes people stop and say, you knew exactly what I needed tonight. I just lost someone really special to me. I'm grieving and I needed this class. I had a hard day at work. I really needed this class. I, am trying something new, and this was exactly where I needed to be. So thank you. But oftentimes I don't get that.
Yeah, I love you that you reminded me of that, because I think we live in a society where we have a quick fix. If I do this, then all will be well. Or if I eat frozen blueberries, then I'm going to be healthy. Like, that's the number one thing. And I think some people feel frustrated with yoga is because, everyone says, oh, I feel so much better, like mentally, emotionally. And they leave a class and they're like, well, I don't feel anything different. And I appreciate you saying that this is a practice, because you have to keep working at it, and eventually you'll start to notice those small little chips that break through that armor. So I appreciate you saying that. But do people come to you and say to you, like, hey, I've noticed I'm not the same, or I'm different, or like, what are some of the stories that people have shared with you with regards to how you've touched them, or how yoga has touched them?
I think if someone has, been coming for a while, and we've kind of created a little teacher-student relationship, and they feel safe enough to stay after class and tell me things, like there has been people who've stopped by and said, I've been going through a really tough time, and this has really helped me. Yoga has really helped me. I take this home with me and I practice in my living room, or, I can breathe through moments in my day because we've practiced breathing here. And I think there's often times where people will just, again, enter the room, maybe sigh when they leave, and then you can almost tell in their eyes, like, when people leave, we usually say goodbye, or, have a good rest of your week. And it's just like in their eyes where they're like, thank you, like a genuine thank you. I needed that. And again, I'm just there to just lead them through poses, to make them feel a little bit deeper, to question things about how they're thinking, add some gratitude into their practice. But they're the ones doing the real work. They're the ones showing up for themselves. And sometimes that's just the hardest part, is finding yourself on the mat on a Monday night when you don't want to be there, and pushing through and showing up for yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Cassie, because again, you're from a small community, you're living in a small community. What would change in small communities if spaces like yours became the norm rather than the exception? What do you think?
I think, I think we would see a lot more connection in our community. I feel like people are very isolated since 2020. Like isolation's kind of become the norm for around here. And you're seeing more yoga studios pop up here, which is awesome. It's it's really, really great to see that studios are popping up and they're filling up too. So people need it. Our community needs it when that happens. But I think that you start seeing people authentically being themselves, showing up for who they are, being able to set a boundary, having the confidence to set a boundary, maintain a boundary, having genuine feelings. And it's not just, how are you today? I'm fine. I'm good. It's like, how are you today? Oh, you know what? I'm actually having like a really hard day. Let's talk about it. Okay. And I think we'd see a lot more feelings of safety and openness. And still a lot of people in the valley that have a lot of judgment, and there's spaces and people that when I'm around them, I don't feel safe to open up. I don't feel safe to say how I'm feeling. And it's very, it's not a very personal conversation or a personal experience. But I'm also saving my heart and I'm closing it a little bit for times when I do feel safe to open it up. But I feel like if everyone had a little bit more openness and willingness, people would feel a lot more safe to be able to express themselves and set boundaries and find more softness in their lives.
Yeah, I love that because I often reflect, we look at the external environment of what we see and we say, oh man, they've got it all together. But I'm often reminded when the Buddha had said, we are all suffering, right? And I have to remind
Mm-hmm.
myself that they look like they have their shit together, but deep down inside they're suffering. And that
Yes.
person beside me on the mat is going through something, and that person over in the corner is going through something, and that person walking down the street is going through something. So, in my heart, I've developed compassion because I recognize that we are all suffering, and I love that about the space that you've created. Cassie, I often like to end with a reflection question, and many people find it difficult. So, if you were your younger self sitting with you here, what would you say to her? And how would you help her feel safe enough to just be?
I think, first of all, I would just give her a great big hug. I think that's would be what she needed. I think I would give her a big hug, a long squeeze, and tell her that everything is okay. Everything's going to be okay. Because I think when I was younger, it was a lot of, you know, what ifs, a lot of anxiety around the future, a lot of anxiety around the present, even. And I think I would tell her that she was okay to be herself, her authentic self. I would tell her that, you know, she didn't have to earn love by working hard. She didn't have to make anyone else proud besides herself. I was always seeking that external satisfaction from other people where it would make me feel better if others were proud of me or others, the more people that liked me, the better. I think I would just tell her that she's enough as she is and she's worthy of love and kindness. I was very shy when I was younger, and I wouldn't talk in class, or I wouldn't go out of my comfort zone. And I think I would just tell her that her voice really does matter. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, Cassie, thank you so much. One of the things that I do and our guests often do is we cry in this podcast. So thank you so much. I'm also dealing with allergies, so thank you so much for sharing that because through you saying that, I see that through your boys as well. And I don't know them, but I can see how they've got such a great mom who is able to say, "Hey, you know what? You're enough. Like just be who
Yeah.
you are. You're enough." What a great gift that you're giving your kids and those around you as well. So Yeah, thank you so much. Cassie, can you just uh, share just a little bit if people are interested in, because I'm in Ontario and went to Nova Scotia, if they want to connect with you or find out more about the Loft, do you have websites? Do you have social media, that type of thing?
We do. We are on Instagram. We're on Facebook. If you look up the Loft Yoga and Wellness in South Berwick, Nova Scotia, Annapolis Valley, you will find us there. And then if you Google the Loft Yoga and Wellness, our website will also come up there, and it gives a list of our instructors and our classes and what we have to offer. And I'd also like to just thank you for giving me the time and space and energy today, and just such kind words. So I really do appreciate this. Thank you so much.
If you are ever in the Annapolis Valley, and for those that might be there, please go. It truly is. The Annapolis Valley is flanked by, we call them mountains. They're two beautiful hills. And as I look at, in my mind's eye, I see the front entrance of the building, and it's the South Mountain is behind it, with surrounded by beautiful orchards, which will be coming into bloom soon. So I encourage you to check it out for sure. Cassie, this has been a very heartwarming experience for me, and I'm so excited about the growth of that you're offering and simply becoming connected with who people are, like providing that space. It is, I wish it was there, when I was growing up, because I'm sure my trajectory in life would have been vastly different had you been there. So thank you for what you're doing for the community.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Inner Practice. Cassie's story reminds us that healing doesn't always come from doing more, from feeling more, from slowing down enough to notice what's happening within us and having the courage to stay there. If you want to know more about the Loft, check out the show notes for links to their website, Facebook, and Instagram page. If this conversation resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need a space to feel seen, heard, and understood. And if you'd like to support the podcast, you can follow, subscribe, or even buy me a coffee. Your support helps keep these conversations alive and accessible. I also love hearing from you. Your reflections and comments are always read and shared with our guests. And if you feel called to share your own story of healing through yoga or mindfulness, I invite you to reach out with a short bio. This is a space for voices like yours. Until next time, stay curious, stay present, and keep returning to your inner practice.